Welcome back. This is one of those daring Indianomics where we are looking at the job segment. It's daring because India doesn't have very good labor data, but we have experts who are trying to fill in the gaps. I have been speaking with Latha Chakraborty of Citi, Rituparna Chakraborty of the co-founder and executive director at TeamLease, and Chintan Thakkar, who's the chief financial officer at InfoEdge. Well, Samiran, we do have, I take on board what you say, that overall industry of construction, excluding construction, is actually still in a sorry state, that it is only 27 million jobs. I mean, it is less than what it was in 2019. Now, this is largely explained by the auto sector. Auto sector accounts, I understand, for 49% of India's manufacturing GDP. So the fact that that sector is running under capacity is perhaps contributing to a large extent to this fall in jobs. But if you were to extrapolate from what Chintan and Rituparna are also saying, that there is this huge ripple effect of IT, and then you saw the export numbers and some of the lead indicators, GST for instance, indicating healthy consumption. Are you getting a sense that Q3 and Q4 can be better?
So Latha, three things here. So first one is that as we were discussing in the first quarter, the Q-on-Q wage growth was positive.
Yes.
But if you look at the consumption data from the GDP side, Q-on-Q, it was down 15%, which means that there is some amount of forced savings, which has happened during the second wave of the pandemic, also like in the first wave it happened. So that forced savings could get spent over the festive season, over the next few months. And to that extent, consumption recovery can be sustained by that. The second interesting thing that we are observing in our rural consumption index versus the urban consumption index is that for almost 13 months from last year, the rural index was always running higher than the urban index. There was an exceptionalism of rural demand last year. This year, what we are observing is that rural and urban demand, they're almost moving in tandem. This kind of ties in with what we were discussing about some of the sectors which are doing better in employment are more urban type of sectors.
Yes.
And that probably is driving the urban demand up. And what we are observing in the rural is that particularly the rural non-farm wage growth is really, really lagging a lot. I mean, it's barely positive now, which was not the case earlier. If you recall, last year, this number was close to 8-10% also for a brief period.
Yeah.
So that decline in rural wages coupled with improvement in the urban labor market is leading to a situation where urban consumption is catching up with rural consumption. And the third thing is that while urban consumption starts picking up, we start seeing these things in GST numbers, etc., better, because that's the more formal economy which gets captured in GST, etc. And the last point, obviously, is, as you mentioned, that we are getting some tailwinds from the global economy where our exports are doing well. So all the export-related ecosystem doing better is also probably supporting this urban demand. So overall, this is broadly a positive story that we are getting into right now. The question is that for this to sustain, we need the investment cycle to also pick up. So with what lag the capacity utilization levels reaches that 75% kind of mark where the capacity utilization, the investment cycle starts, is what we will be closely watching.
Okay. Yes, and I guess at the moment it's still running around 70, according to the RBI's latest data, 69%. So that capex cycle perhaps has to take a turn. Chintan, what can you tell us about tier 2 cities, and how much of your data helps you extrapolate for next quarter?
Yeah. So as I said, that right now it's more like, looks like tech-led and top city-led growth that we are seeing it. But there is a spillover effect that's kind of helping in tier 2 as well as the non-tech sector as well. I think what's probably perhaps happening in my view is also that if you have to really tie with the overall economic number that you are seeing in the labor market versus what the platform is showing, is that maybe there is this formalization of economies also happening. And that's why you are seeing a better numbers on our platform when it comes to non-tech sector as well, as compared to, the overall numbers that you see. And that's probably is matching with the GST number as well, right? So taking that as the cue, we think that, the recovery in the tier 2 cities as well as in the non-tech, industry would be gradual and would again continue to be tech-led. So that's what we, think that that's how the recovery is going to shape.
Yeah, your data is for the formal sector.
Primarily led by tech sector. Yep.
No, I take your point. Your data is for the formal sector, and Samiran also is dovetailing it by saying that it is formal sector, GST, exports, etc., which have done well. Rituparna, I still trust that you are able to touch the informal sector in some sense. How are wage levels? I mean, when you staff at the bottom of the pyramid, have wage levels fallen?
So let's just say that I'm a representative or custodian largely of those who earn less than 26,000 rupees. However, they are formally engaged.
Yes.
What we have noticed is that during the first half of this financial year, unlike same time last year, there has been a wage escalation to the tune of about 9% on an average. And that has been led primarily by a couple of factors. One, of course, is that last year we have seen a tsunami of wage disruption. We've seen wage cuts, we've seen all kinds of furloughs. And however, when the economy is starting to show signs of recovery, employers are very keen to hold on to whatever talent that they have. So that has also triggered this kind of a wage escalation or a pay rise. Sales has been the torchbearer of having witnessed the highest, if I may say so, kind of escalation in wages. Because when you're in a recovery phase, you are trying to accumulate revenues, and you do need
sales
to depend. And you need your sales. So sales across functions, but sales in BFSI, for example, sales in consumer durable, sales in pretty much all functions that you can think of, which is service overall. I think it's leaning on the sales. So we've seen. We have seen improvement in wages in e-commerce, which is warehouse executive, marginal. The warehouse executive, we have seen improvement in delivery agents and executives profile. And the wages have held good to previous levels for other sectors where hiring has started. Because whatever it is, whether there is pandemic or otherwise, I think India has an acute skill deficit problem. So even in spite of the pandemic, we feel that essentially comes into play whenever we're talking about maintaining wage levels.
Okay. So wage levels as in, watch and ward staff, watchmen, drivers, even at that level, you are seeing a rise in salaries.
Yes, I mean, there is either they will hold the salaries that they were earlier earning, or in some cases, they would have a positive impact on their wages.
Okay. Well, a final question to just wind it all up, Samiran. It definitely looks like the formal sector has something good going for it, barring a few sectors like automobiles, which are, which have a lot of technology and other challenges. What is your sense that will this be able to make a mark in the informal sector, which you yourself are pointing out has not been advantaged? Rural wages, you pointed out, youth unemployment, your report speaks about that. Do you think the growth machine will be able to at least make some kind of a dent in this youth unemployment, rural non-farm?
So, Latha, before I answer your question, just 30 seconds on a point that we probably did not touch upon is that while nominal wage growth is happening, part of the reason simply is that for almost a couple of years, we have average inflation running at more than 6%. That means that actual real wage growth is much lower than what the nominal wage growth is suggesting. So that's also something which we have to keep in mind. But to answer your question, it's a difficult one to say that the structural problems will get sorted. Structural labor market issues will get sorted so quickly. In fact,
no, not sorted. I mean, just at least scratched.
So my hope is the recovery in the private capital cycle.
Okay.
If we start seeing that happening from next year, then I would tend to think that this job loss in the industry construction sector, which has been a big worry post-pandemic, then this scarring will be relatively limited next year with that capex recovery. As we were discussing, construction sector is almost back to pre-COVID, and services are also back to pre-COVID. But at a very structural level, my biggest worry is that we have seen a significant amount of urban to rural migration. Normally, in a developing economy, we should see the opposite of
Opposite.
it.
Yeah.
At what point of time would we start seeing those rural folks being employed in more productive urban jobs? Is when we can say that the structural labor market issues are getting sorted out.
That is, of course, the large theme. We wouldn't have time to go into that. But what I get from all of you experts is that the formal sector employment has definitely come back and in many places is way ahead of 2019 levels, and technology and exports and consumption as represented by GST can start a multiplier effect, a virtuous cycle, which could create more jobs in the urban sector. Is that enough to pull back the reverse migration? Is that enough to get the youth back into employment where unemployment is rising? Our experts are not yet sure of that. Well, thank you very much for trying to fit in a great deal on this very difficult topic of jobs and wages. We wrap up on this edition of Indianomics.